Are 911 Carreras right now as cheap as they'll ever get? A silly question given the current economic climate, right? But I'm posing it anyway, and have good reasons for it. Car prices collapse, the auto market bubble just popped, and car prices are about to crash, are just a few of the examples that you might have encountered on YouTube during the past few weeks. Indeed, as we saw in a recent market update, there are cars for which prices have been plummeting since the pandemic price top. Porsche Taycans are, for example, down by 40%. But there are also cars that saw prices decline after the pandemic price top, only to stabilize during last year. In a video that I posted a few weeks ago, I showed you that this bottoming price pattern applies to many 911s. And in this video, we'll zoom into the 911 Carrera market. This market might be among the strongest one that I'm currently tracking on the channel. If you're holding out for 911 prices to crash, you could be waiting for a long time. Let's dive into the price trends. Over here we have the price trends per model type for the 992 Carrera 2 and Carrera 2 S's. And this reveals a typical price trend up to Q1 2023. Prices increased during the pandemic, topped mid-2022 and decreased. However, since Q1 2023, prices hardly declined. Looking at the numbers, we can see that S models are down by 7.9% compared to last year, and that is 7.3% for the base models. Quite good results, but more about that later. It's the development during the last 9 months that really stands out. During these months, S's lost only 1%, and base models 2.7%, and these numbers are exceptionally low. As you can see, the depreciation rates flattened significantly, and there are currently no signs that depreciation rates will accelerate soon. Prices are then also still close to MSRP. A Carrera 2 starts at $116,000, and if you add a few options, you can easily push the price to $140,000 or even more. Low mileage 2023 cars are, for example, listed at $150,000. Which could be the same as their respective MSRP. So what drives this? Why are 911 prices so strong while the rest of the market continued to decline? A recent Trendlist article speculates that Porsche is purposefully keeping inventory levels low to support the prices, a game that must be especially known to Ferrari buyers. Looking at the supply graph, we can indeed see that there were many new cars listed after the release, but also that this number quickly fell to 0 cars in the beginning of 2023. Supply for used cars increased steadily, but also seems to have stabilized now. Moreover, the cars that are listed for sale sell like hotcakes. Cars were selling quicker and quicker, and in November 23, only 6% of the certified 911 Carreras were listed for sale for longer than 3 months. This is an astonishing low number, and shows that the scarcity level in the 992 market is indeed high. Something that for sure drove the price stability up in the last 9 months. Now perhaps Porsche indeed produced less cars than demand. That could be an explanation for the strong price trend. Another reason could be the price increase for new cars. After all, if MSRP increases, it usually lifts up the complete used market. But irrespective of the price driver, it doesn't only affect the 992 market, it also affects the 991 market. Over here we have the price trend for the base, S and GTS's split by the .1 and .2 generations. Again, we can see this typical pattern where prices increased during the pandemic, topped in 2022 and decreased up until the beginning of 2023. Since then, prices have been relatively stable. Currently the prices are below the level of last year. .2 base models are down by 6.9%, S's by 9.5% and GTS's by 10.8%. For the .1s this is 8.2% for the S's, 5.6% for the GTS's and 6.4% for the base model. Especially the .1 scored good on this comparison to last year. Now looking again at the last 9 months, like we did for the 992, we can see that the yearly drop is heavily influenced by the decrease in the end of 2022. We can see that 991s only depreciated by 1 to 3%, with exception of the .2 GTS's. But the reliability of GTS numbers is limited here, due to the small market size. So what drives the prices here? Are it the frustrated 992 buyers who don't want to wait for a car? Could be, but we can never be certain about that. What we do know though, is that 991s are no longer extremely expensive. In relative terms of course. If we look at the trends for the base and S models only, but adjust them for inflation, we can see that prices are approximately at the same level as before the pandemic. 991.2s are only $1,000 more expensive, while this is $3,000 to $5,000 for the .1s. Indeed, very small differences at this price level. But now then, what about the older generations? They saw massive price increases during the pandemic. Did they manage to hold some of that value? Let's start with the 997. Over here we have the price trend split by the .1 and .2s and by the base, S and GTS models. But as you can see, it looks like a big plate of spaghetti. Some 997 models are so rare that the uncertainty in the trend is extremely large. So let's focus on the reliable trends and look at the breakdown by mileage. Over here we have the largest market, the 997.1 Carrera, broken down by the different mileage categories. The orange line, for example, shows the price development for the cars that have a mileage between roughly 39 and 53,000 miles. The volatility for these trends is of course a bit higher than for the aggregate ones, but the dynamics are the same as what we saw before. A big increase during the pandemic, a top in the beginning of 2022, a correction, and a relatively stable development. Compared to 1 year ago, prices are down by an average of 6.1%, and this mainly results from the decrease in the two highest mileage categories. They are down by an average of 10%, while this is 2.2% for the two lowest categories. Potentially this can be explained by the fact that 997s are moving more and more towards a collectible car status. The same can be said about the 996. 996 prices had an insanely strong run up during the pandemic and only came down slightly after they topped. Over here we have the prices for the .1s and .2s split by the base and the S models. And note that the S's are the 4S's. I didn't add the drivetrain configuration to the data split because I didn't want to split the base models. Now, as I already mentioned, the 996 price trend has a relatively low correlation to the market trend. Prices increased during the pandemic, but didn't really top in 2022. Prices decreased since then, but the decrease is much lower than in other market segments. Look for example at the blue line. Prices hardly changed since November 2021. Back then, the average price for a 996.1 was $29,850 and now it is $28,500. Looking at the decrease during last year, we can see that .1 base models lost 1.4%, .2 base models 2.7% and the 4S's 4.9%. And note that the last two numbers are corrected for changes in the market composition. Alright, we saw now how the price trends in the 911 Carrera market look like. And based on some of the alarming headlines that we saw during the past few weeks, it doesn't seem too bad, right? But let's see what the data has to say. Over here we have the US year-over-year price changes for almost all cars that feature on my channel. On the horizontal axis we have the price change compared to last year in percentages, and on the vertical axis we have the number of cars to which this change applies. Now the average decrease during last year was 8.4%, and most cars lost between 13 and 4%. The 911 Carrera base and S models did better than this average. 992s lost 7.6%, 991.2s 8.2%, 991.1 7.3%, 997 6.1% and 996 is only 3%. In other words, they slightly outperformed the market, and perhaps that doesn't come as a surprise. There's however one other interesting thing that we can see now. Depreciation rates in the 992 and 991 market are almost identical. And this is strange, right? Traditional logic tells us that new cars depreciate more than old cars. In this case, however, it seems that the price drops are mainly the result of a general market correction, and not so much driven by an increase in the mileage or age. We can also see that the 996 is a clear outlier. I already mentioned this in a previous video, but I will say it again. If you want a cheap car with low depreciation, have a good look at the 996. Previous price behavior is of course no guarantee for future behavior, but it contains information about the short-term trend. Now one could of course argue that advertised prices, which is what we're looking at here, yield wrong price trends. In theory, one could think of a situation where advertised prices remain stable, but selling prices decrease. That is, discount rates on advertised prices increase. It is however unlikely that the price trends that I showed you previously are completely off. First, the flattening of the price trends covers a long time period and isn't based on a single data point. The theoretical situation that we just sketched wouldn't exist for a long time, as listing prices would correct over time. Second, and this is the stronger argument, the inventory data shows that the scarcity level in the market increased, meaning that right now it's more difficult to get a 911 Carrera and that this is a key price driver. Concretely, this means that 911s are selling quicker, and in the cases that they don't sell, are discounted less than before. Over here we have the percentage of cars per generation that aren't sold after 3 months. We can see that these rates increased significantly in the second half of 2022, meaning that the cars were selling slower and slower and that the scarcity level in the market was lower. Since January though, the rates are falling. Cars are selling quicker again, and this means that the scarcity level increased. For example, only 14% of the 992 Carreras are listed for sale for longer than 3 months, whereas this was 28% in February. And this development that we see over here of course supports the price development that we saw earlier. Prices fell during 2022 as cars were selling slower, but have been stable since the beginning of this year as cars were selling quicker and quicker. This is a key piece to the data, but there's another piece to this puzzle. The price change for cars that didn't sell. Sellers must be aware that these cars are selling again quicker. Over here we have the discount rate for the cars that aren't sold after 3 months, split by generation. Now we can see a clear seasonal pattern in which unsold inventory is discounted more during the winter than during the summer. But that's not the thing I would like to focus on. If I remove the 997 and 996 due to the high uncertainty in the numbers, we can see very clearly that sellers aren't discounting unsold inventory as much as during November last year. 992s are discounted by an average rate of 3%, while this was 6% during last year. Also, this is in line with all the data that we saw before. Scarcity levels increased, and sellers know this. A skeptic person could of course argue that sellers are simply not reducing the price because they're stubborn and hold on to inventory longer. But this contradicts the data that we saw before. Cars are selling quicker, not slower. Let's wrap up and conclude. Are 911s right now as cheap as they'll ever get? In all likelihood, no. But the price development during last year shows that the market is incredibly strong. When it comes to the 991 and 992, we saw large price drops in the second half of 2022, but relatively stable prices throughout 2023. Instead of selling slower, cars are selling quicker again, and unsold inventory is discounted less than at the same time last year. But even with low production numbers and MSRP increases, it's very unlikely that the trend will remain flat or already will turn upwards. The cars are simply too new for that, and we saw that 911s are approximately just as expensive as before the pandemic. However, it does show that 991 and 992s didn't follow the large decreases that we saw for some other models, and that they might never come. Therefore, my message is similar to the one when prices were topping in the beginning of 2022. Now is the time to monitor this market closely if you're planning to buy one of these cars. Is the crash still coming, or was the 2022 correction the largest decrease that we'll see for a while? Based on the current data, it seems to me that the 991 and 992 markets will follow a normal depreciation pattern in the foreseeable future. Now when it comes to the older generations, and especially the 996, we saw that it was almost immune to the market trend. During the past 2 years, a car that wasn't driven only lost 4.5% or $1.4 thousand. Again, historical price behavior is no guarantee for future price behavior, but it contains some information about the short-term future. A sudden crash in the 996 market seems then also unlikely to me. And with that we arrived at the end of this video. Now if you enjoyed this data-driven way of analyzing car markets but would like to see a video for a different car, head over to my channel. Over there you'll find market updates for a large variety of cars. Can't find the car you're looking for? Let me know the name of the car by commenting it down below in the comment section. Once there are enough requests for a certain car, I'll make a video about it. As always, thank you for watching, and I hope to see you next week for a new video.